I can't keep this out of my mind any longer. I haven't put up much in the way of content in a while because I keep thinking maybe I should keep this to myself. First, because it's negative, and I spent a lot of time and effort on my video saying nice things about Pathfinder 2. I'm a little bit insecure about appearing inconsistent. I don't want to be a flip-flopper. I don't want my audience to see me as a flip-flopper because that's embarrassing. And second, because maybe it's just me.
I don't understand. Things were going so great. What happened? Something must have happened.
It's not you. It's me.
Maybe this is just a little persnickety critique, and it's not that big of a deal at all. And the last reason that I've been reluctant to say this is because at about the time I realized it, in the 1.6 update, Paizo sort of acknowledged this.
Everything's perfectly all right now. We're fine. We're all fine here now. Thank you.
But they did so in a sort of a trust us kind of way that's become almost a meme when it comes to games that are in beta and development. And the developers will say, oh, we're gonna fix this before it goes live.
Trust me.
And I think with that in mind, I'm gonna tell you about it anyway. Magic in Pathfinder 2 has had the color sucked out of it. It's boring. Since I was a 9-year-old kid trying to figure out how to use BECME Rules Cyclopedia, I loved Vancian magic. Not really the core concept or idea of it. Like most people, I can agree with the critique that the static spells and the rigidity of the spell slots is kinda, well, not as elegant as Louis XVI's drawing room. What I love about Vancian magic, though, is how quirky and diverse it is. From Dimension Door to Bigby's Grasping Hand to Color Spray to Six Snakes, the spellbook in its massive library has weird stuff for wizards and clerics to do, and they act like wizards and clerics do in fantasy worlds because those spells are there. I think that the genre identity of games from the D&D lineage is really tied up with the Vancian spellbook. It's what kind of makes D&D magic different than anime or action schlock magic, where it's just red lasers versus green lasers in a battle to the death. And in the spellcasting system for Pathfinder 2, that's all gone horribly wrong. If you're interested in why I think so, then stay tuned, grab a beverage. First, thank you to the patrons. I've only sort of got my Patreon page up and running, and I haven't been able to keep up with how often I had been making content when I first made the page. I haven't charged these people anything yet because of the delays, but I want to send a huge thank you to them for supporting the content as I'm ramping up the quality level and working towards funding improvements to the content that you see here. Alright, so let's spell out why the magic well hasn't got healthy water in it when it comes to Pathfinder 2. I'm sure that since we're past the 2-minute mark, some angry person in the comments section is already furiously clacking away with some hot tips about how I can improve my style. Number 1. All spellcasters have a lot fewer spells in Pathfinder 2 than in any recent edition of a Vancian D&D style game. At first, I could see the trade-offs with this, and I could get behind it, the contradiction of spell slots, when combined with what will come later in this video, was where we started to see the problems.
Gentlemen, pray silence for the President of the Royal Society for putting things on top of other things.
This starts out by slicing off the bonus spells for high ability scores. I should acknowledge that you do get something powerful in exchange. Your ability score modifier applies to your spell saving throws, and even to damage in some cases, and even other things in the spell description sometimes.
Hey, that's pretty good.
But it's compounded by a plateau state for each level of spells. You're never going to have a pile of 6 or 7 first and second level spells in Pathfinder 2. In fact, you'll be hard pressed to have more than 3. Of course, in exchange, your first level spells have the same saving throw difficulty as your 9th level spells. That's right, kids. Grease in Pathfinder 2, when a 12th level wizard is casting it, has a shot at getting a pit fiend to fall on his keister. And as hilarious and fun as that may sound, this is where we start to run into the bleaching of magic in Pathfinder 2. First, because grease is always money in a fight. When is it that you bring in the non-combat utility spells, like Hold Portal or Clairvoyance? Remember that the power of a given spell doesn't scale as you level up in Pathfinder 2, where once duration might be 1 minute per caster level, and damage might be 1d6 per caster level, no longer. And so it is that these low-level utility spells are set in stone as having a low level of utility. You still have to pay the opportunity cost by using your turn to cast them in combat situations, so because they don't scale, you're in a lot worse opportunity cost in those situations than you might have been in prior editions. The reasoning behind all this is pretty clear. Pathfinder 2 has it as a design goal to make leveling up simpler and easier. The effect of a spell doesn't need to readjust every time you level up, and you don't need to learn that new leveled up state. You're gaining fewer spells per level, so the learning curve doesn't get ahead of you. And at level 1, there's less going on overall, so maybe you don't feel overwhelmed to begin with. And each time that you level up, the decision tree that's been a huge source of analysis paralysis and completist, I've got to read all the options thinking, is that much smaller. And Pathfinder 2 doubles down and takes advantage of this idea of simpler leveling by also making leveling up faster than I've ever seen. That's because the XP table is now flat, where once it took more and more XP to level up, even when you were fighting monsters equal to your level, in Pathfinder 2 you'll level up at the same number of level equivalent encounters regardless of your level. The journey from level 1 to 2 is the same length as the journey from level 4 to 5. I can see the advantages of this, especially with Paizo's business model of adventure paths, as adventures can contain nice, even amounts of content across all levels of the game. And then there's the possibility that you'll ascend to higher levels naturally in Pathfinder 2, so you get to play with the really high level 7, 8, and 9 spells, and the really high level 13, 14, 15 monsters that we all ogle in the rulebook and bestiary, but only rarely get to play with. So that's all great, except for the second thing that compounds this. The power level of each spell is massively contracted in Pathfinder 2. Dimension Door is now restricted to line of sight. Horde Poldril and Knock, which used to be 100% effective at doing their jobs, are now left to a roll of the dice. Invisibility now lasts a paltry 1 minute. It's not useful for scouting any longer, just for escaping or a momentary buff to stealth for an ambush. Detect Thoughts and Levitate have migrated upward from level 2 to level 3. This means that the utility spells, even as they're weaker, are also closer to your top end, where you pay the highest opportunity cost for giving up a combat spell. I'm absolutely sure that someone is going to mention that the heightening mechanic that's on some spells that allows you to get better effects is there by spending higher slots. My response is that that's my point exactly. If you're spending a higher slot, it's coming at a huge opportunity cost. And you're going to think twice and probably not do it at all and save the blasting. Now do you see what I'm saying? It feels like the spellcasting system is pressing down with a 20-ton weight, squeezing the mischief out of Vancian spellcasting and pushing spellcasters more towards being laser blasters and combat buffers. Now, as a matter of taste, if that's your thing, more power to you. But in this case, the more power that you're getting is coming at the expense of the rich, diverse, mischievous, non-combat utility magic that really helped me through years to transport me into the fantasy worlds that class and level games imbibe in. So, I could mention, and I should mention, that Paizo has acknowledged some of this in the 1.6 update. They say that they'll be increasing the power level of spells overall. Well, that sounds great. But in the same breath, they release new versions of all the damaging spells, pushing the damage. Buffing non-damaging spells is something that they say is too great in scope, and we'll have to wait until the final release for them to do it. The trouble is that now non-combat spells are that much further from the finish line. They have that much further to go, now that combat spells have increased damage. How will anyone know if utility magic has come far enough that it will see play without coming at an egregious opportunity cost that will make your character impotent? The answer is that we won't know. For the sake of the side of role-playing that's transportative, that's about the fiction, the worlds, and the stories, rather than the combat and the hit points on the grid, utility magic needs fixing, and that fix needs to be floated and tested by the community. Otherwise, it all comes down to trust me. So what do you think? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to slam the like button, share it around, and if you haven't hit that subscribe button, it's a great way to support the content and the channel. And as always, thank you for watching.